Pro Football Network. I don't know who's behind that or if it's reputable at all, but most of their top 10 makes sense. They got Texas A&M at 6. They got Bama 1, Ohio State 2, NC State 3. It says bold prediction time is NC State. Break the final four of our way too early college football top 25. They returned 9 defensive and 8 offensive starters, including quarterback Devin Leary. They win the ACC with a comprehensive record while beating a ranked Clemson on the road. That puts them in a great situation to permeate the college football playoff. The logic there is not way off. They just got to pull it off. Would be comparable to what Pitt did last year. They got Georgia 4, Utah 5.
That Florida game.
I
mean,
is that week 2?
It's week 1, isn't it?
Week 1. They got Texas A&M at 6, Notre Dame 7, Baylor 8. I'm not going to argue with that based on what I saw at the end of the year.
Did lose some guys to the draft, though.
They did. They absolutely did. It says as a Big 12, one of the most difficult conferences to predict this year as a result, and despite the loss of a lot of guys on the defensive side, wouldn't be a surprise to see Baylor repeat as conference champions. Pitt is at 9 and USC is 10. Again, I don't know who all is behind this preseason top 25 from Pro Football Network, but that's not a terrible top 10.
No, I mean, the NC State thing is a cute little novelty pick, but other than that, it adds up.
Maybe this is Cole Kubelik's top 25.
Maybe so. The reason I'm so fascinated by Texas A&M is something that you asked Olin a second ago. They signed the greatest recruiting class of all time, and the largest salaried recruiting class of all time as well. It's pretty incredible. But seriously, those guys aren't ready yet. And I don't know if this team is ready yet. I mean, if Max Johnson was really the difference between last year's team being underwhelming, underperforming, whatever you want to call it, and this year's team being a playoff team, I've got some bad news for you. So you've got these lofty expectations, and I agree with you. I think they've been largely created because of this recruiting class that won't really contribute anything. So you've got this situation where all the talk about Texas A&M is money, and they're ready now, and all this stuff, but the reality is they don't know who their quarterback is going to be. They're not picking from the best options anyway, and they did lose a handful of guys that were big-time contributors from that team a year ago that lost 4 games.
The write-up says if 5-star commitments could guarantee you a national championship, Texas A&M would sit atop the college football top 25. However, they don't. The Aggies may need to lean on a number of these freshmen throughout the season as they return only 4 of their defensive starters from last year, while returning playmakers like Anais Smith and Devin Achane boost the offense. The Aggies are likely to come up short in the SEC, and yet they have them at 6 nationally. Here's my problem, Borky. I don't think Texas A&M can win a national championship in today's college football landscape until they adjust the way they play offensively. I don't think they can do it.
Didn't we learn last year that they can't?
Ground and pound doesn't work. Look, I could take you. So A&M lost to Ole Miss. What was the final in that game? 24-14, is that right?
Yeah, they scored a late touchdown, but they were dominated for 3 quarters and 10 minutes of the fourth quarter. Completely dominated.
Would you think I was crazy if I argued to you that if Texas A&M had been willing to go for it on 4th and short, I'm not talking 4th and crazy like Lane Kiffin does, but 4th and less than 2 yards, if they had done that throughout the course of the game, the outcome in Oxford might have been different last year? Because that's what Ole Miss did, right? I mean, they kept Texas A&M kind of behind the chains. And what was it, 3, 4, 5 times in the game where it was 4th and 1, 4th and 2, and you look up and here comes the punt team jogging out, punt it away, give it back to Ole Miss. And sometimes Ole Miss capitalized, and sometimes they didn't, but it turned into a little bit of a field position game. It was very much a throwback type game that you were watching. And Ole Miss was not, I mean, it's not like they were a top 25 defense a year ago. They were functional defensively, but A&M didn't have a threat down the field, and Ole Miss committed to stopping Texas A&M's running game and had some success doing it and really made it kind of a snoozer.
He dared Zach Calzado to beat him. And guess what he couldn't do? And now he's not there anymore.
He's not. He's now at Auburn.
But now they're going to dare Max Johnson to beat them. Guess what Max Johnson couldn't do against Ole Miss last year? He couldn't do it either with his other team. They're fascinating. I mean, I am more fascinated outside of this state with Texas A&M than I am anybody else in the SEC this year. I really am. Because I think that, and this doesn't really matter, this doesn't affect results on the field, but I think you're going to have an entire region of the country kind of rooting against them. They're going to be a punchline if they start losing games this season. They're going to be a punchline. All that money, and what did you buy? 8-4. You're going to see that. You're going to hear that from me.
Among others.
Among others. They interest me, man, because they didn't give Jimbo Fisher a fully guaranteed $90 million contract to go to the Outback Bowl. That's not what they're paying him for, and that's not what they expect. And despite Ross Bjork and the fan base's "see, Jimbo's not going anywhere" chest thumping that they did last year, that patience is going to wear very, very thin when the oil tycoon is spending $2 million on a defensive tackle. That patience is going to wear very thin when they are not just invested in the facilities, when they are literally invested in the product on the field. If it's not up to snuff, all that rah, 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 we pull the rope in the same direction, Aggie forever, Jimbo's not going anywhere stuff will sour fast.
So Chase is a great texter, and he sends us a message here. He says, Georgia won a national title with a quarterback throwing 2,900 yards and 29 touchdowns. Elite defense and ball control will always put you in a position to win a title. But, Chase, don't we need to look a little more closely at what Georgia did? First of all, 29 touchdown passes is a lot. Matt Corral didn't throw 29 touchdown passes last year. How many did Will Rogers finish with last season? You can double-check me on that. But listen to the scores. Yes, I know it got tight at the end.
36 touchdowns for Will Rogers, and he throws the ball 65 times a game.
They had a tight win against Clemson, 10-3. But then they scored 56 against UAB, 40 against South Carolina, 62 against Vanderbilt, 37 against Arkansas, 34 against Auburn, little bit lower scoring game, 30 against Kentucky, 34 against Florida, 43 against Missouri, 41 against Tennessee, 56 against Charleston Southern, hung 45 on Georgia Tech. They lost the SEC championship game, and then they beat Michigan with 34 points, and they scored 33 against Alabama. They were, I don't know if it's fair to say that Georgia was explosive offensively, but they had dudes on the offensive side of the ball. Probably the best tight end in America. And I think they would have been more of a downfield passing game if not for the George Pickens injury. I mean, that kind of changed what they were and who they were. Florida's always going to run the football. I'm sorry, Georgia. I was reading a text. Georgia is always going to run the football, and Kirby's always going to do everything he can to have an elite defense.
And is Texas A&M prepared? I mean, Georgia might have had the greatest collection of defensive talent in the history of the sport this past season. They had 5 defensive players drafted in the first round of the draft.
Yeah.
Is that what A&M is this season?
And while, yes, Georgia was not the team that sprinted to the line and they were running as many plays as they could as quickly as they could. But are we sure that Texas A&M, to Borky's point, is Georgia from last year? See, I don't think they are. Georgia recruited the way A&M did, just slightly behind that, for 4 straight years. That's how they built that roster.